Alright, today I'm going to be reviewing a debate between Hayden and Dean and Parker. Now, I was sent this video to react to it, but I usually don't do reaction videos to things like debates and popular subjects because I think everyone's basically retarded. Okay, especially people like Dean and Parker who I've seen Dean on two occasions and Parker on one occasion, and both of them were very mind-numbingly painful experiences because of how inept their arguing ability was. It's just TikTok tactics and like one-liners and stuff like that. It's not serious philosophical inquiry. But in any case, I will be putting myself through this for the good of, I suppose, those who watch, and they can learn something. That being said, let's begin.
Yeah, I voted for Trump. Largely due to pro-life policies. Yeah, so I'm pro-life. He's generally going to be more favorable towards pro-life policies compared to Harris. So
Amanda, thank you for the $6. Okay, on
I
paper,
barely hear him.
putting needs a job. So real, it's just about time. So, if you're pro-life, means you think that elective abortions are wrong.
yes,
Name every single reason why an elective lethal abortion is wrong.
why an elective abortion is wrong?
Name every reason.
It's the unjustified taking of human life.
Phenomenal. Okay. And when you say that it's the unjust termination of human life, you are entailing a rights violation. So let me ask you this question: what gives the life of the fetus moral value?
The fact that it is a living human organism.
Okay.
Okay, so thus far this is some very basic fact-finding about each other's positions. But one thing I will note is that atheists and people who have atheistic mindsets don't come out with like, well, actually agnostic or deist. They're all in the same boat. They're sans God, sans theism, without theism. So they're all in the same boat in that they can't really do any defense. And defense in a debate is really just when you're answering questions. Right now, Hayden is on defense because he's answering Dean's questions. Dean is on offense. So conservatives, Christians, whatnot, I think abortion debates and other things like this are kind of a waste of time because it all comes down to the same thing. Do you have valid epistemic grounding? Epistemic just meaning justification, valid, not just, well, I think so. Now, is it logically coherent? Does it make sense? I think that makes it a waste of time, but Christians and conservatives can play offense and defense, but we're far better on offense because atheists can't play defense. So this will be interesting to see the line he goes down with this.
So now you've made your principle clear. If one is a living human organism, they get sufficient moral value to be granted the right to life, and when you unjustly kill them, it is murder. So let me ask you this question. Okay? Wait, actually, I want to go in a different direction. Do you think that all innocent human life has an identical amount of value?
I would say that
I would say by nature they do.
all innocent human organisms have a right not to be murdered.
Yes, but do they all have the identical amount of moral value? For instance, I'm as morally valuable as you are morally valuable as a fetus is morally
By way of just being human nature, yes.
Well, when you're talking about value, that would be a different thing from a right to live. We agree on
valuable.
agree on
It's
that.
the value that grants the right to life. If something isn't morally valuable, it's not going to have the right to life.
Sure. Then
I don't know if I agree with that. Moral, if something is morally valuable, then it has the right to live. That's too equivocal. I wouldn't agree to that because I think you can make an argument that something like a pig is morally valuable in some sense. Then does it become wrong to kill a pig? I think the line should go down here is that the value necessary for an organism not to be murdered is if it has a human nature. I think it should come down to human nature because that is the one thing that's unique to humans, not moral value. Moral value can apply to multiple different things. A moral value can apply to a hammer because, I mean, a hammer can do good, right? It's a bit weird. I would have said human nature just to avoid that equivocal trap.
I would be willing to say that a born human being has equal value to a preborn human being if we're talking about value being
Perfect.
what we're using to define as having a right not to be murdered.
Perfect. So here's my question. There's a pew pew to your head and two buttons in front of you. Button number one.
What was the first part?
There's a pew pew to your head and two buttons in front of you. Button number one.
Okay, so pew pew to your head. Okay, that means okay, yeah, avoiding censorship, right?
Unalived 10 cryogenically frozen humans I have are biologically alive. Button number 2 analyze 1. Which button are you pressing?
This is what I'm talking about. This is the TikTok debate style. Like, this is the dumbest question you ever ask because it does nothing to further the debate. This question is really, it's like the trolley problem. Okay, this does nothing to advance whether or not abortion is wrong. All this does is ask the other person, are you utilitarian or not? That's basically the question, because for those who don't know, the trolley problem is basically there's two lines of track, okay? And there's 5 people in one, there's one person in another, and a trolley's going down the track. You can either pull the lever to kill 5 people, or not move the lever to kill one person. Or actually, I think it's the other way around. If you pull the lever, one person dies. If you don't pull the lever, 5 people die. And basically, if you say, well, you should kill one for the favor of the 5, that's utilitarianism. You're doing it for the utility, right? And meanwhile, Christians, I assume this guy's a Christian. I'm not sure, but me, I'm a Christian, so I believe morality is not based on utility. Okay, it's wrong to kill, and it's wrong to do anything. So the answer to my answer to try the problem would be to do nothing, because me making a decision that consciously kills another human life is always wrong, no matter the context, assuming it's unjust. And in this case, this to your head, kill 10 for favor of 1. Again, we're talking about human nature, so they're basically equal in terms of moral value. Based on my moral system, I would say, well, I'm not going to push any of the buttons. And then I would say, no, let's not do these retard examples in order to try speak to each other. How about we do some highbrow stuff like talk about epistemology? So this is some stupid TikTok debate stuff. I hope this guy doesn't take debate and pick one of them, because then it's just going to become a crap show. I'm going to have to sit here and watch it.
Why do I have to press one of the buttons?
If
Good.
you don't press either of the buttons, everyone dies. 10 seconds, 1 you
So this is where it gets ridiculous. So Hayden gives a very good answer. Why do I have to press a button? Very good answer. This is a stupid thought experiment. Atheists love their thought experiments. Like, well, what if a piece of dirt formed a big dust ball and then turned into the first human organism? That would completely get rid of the need for God for creating human life. Like these stupid thought experiments that are like, and they talk about us engaging in philosophical masturbation. This is philosophical masturbation to the T. But in any case, it was a good answer. Didn't entertain it. And now, see, Dean, he basically just baited Dean into showing how stupid what he's saying is. Because now he's saying, well, everyone's gonna die if you don't do it. Like, okay, well, at this point, this is, if whatever answer he gives is kind of on an ad balcum pretense, argument by force, kind of like that. So, and in the first place, his answer doesn't do anything to advance the debate. It's just a question of whether you're utilitarian or not. So, this is the retard TikTok debate stuff. Like, if you just watch TikTok, you go like, oh, this guy just got stumped.
Mm-hmm. Okay, just want to make sure I got the question correct. Is it okay if I repeat it back to you? Okay, so you're saying that I have to push one of 2 buttons. There's no other option. If I don't push any of the buttons, then everyone dies. And the option is I push either button A, in which case 10 frozen embryos, for example, those at an IVF clinic would die. And if I push button B, then it sounds like a newborn human would die. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Neither.
Yeah, so let's say that I was to say that I pushed the button that would ultimately result in the death of the newborn human being, which if I'm trying to preserve the maximum amount of living human organisms would be the route that I would want to take, right? Let's say that I choose to do that. Can you tell me how that would then justify abortion?
Okay, so I see where he's going with it. He's trying to tie it into abortion, which is true. That's like I said, it doesn't tie. But see now, it's a bit of a. I think my criticism is more of a rhetorical one, because I don't think you should concede something. And by the way, Dean and Parker are very condescending and rude when they debate. Okay, it's very, very unprofessional, if you will. But as far as this question is concerned, I wouldn't entertain it at all. Even for just to say, okay, well, if I did say this, then what does that mean for the point? I would just say that my answer, the question's whether or not I'm utilitarian, not whether or not abortion's wrong. So let's stop talking about lowbrow, retard stuff and talk about something highbrow.
Can you tell me how that would then justify abortion?
We
Wait,
haven't
no,
even
why'd
gotten
you say
around
if,
to
like, if you,
Wait,
as if that
should
isn't
I-
the
No,
logical
well,
development?
at first I said if, and then I also said that
So-
I'm taking that position, and then I asked,
so
and then I
Hayden-
asked how that would justify abortion.
Okay, so Hayden basically just put himself, Hayden's a utilitarian based on that. And I know some of you guys are gonna be like, well, they said you have to answer. You have no choice. It's like, well, there's such thing as things like false analogies and these other type of fallacies where someone brings up a thought experiment, and the thought experiment itself, in the context of the debate, is a fallacy. It's fallacious. So he's in no obligation to answer that dumb question.
Wait, we haven't gotten.
Okay.
We haven't gotten around to my justification insofar as why I think elective life abortion is prior to the reason why I asked you this question is to demonstrate the absurdity. And in fact, the absurdity in this case would be that you value 10 cryogenically frozen unicellular organisms over an infant.
Well, I can barely hear Dean. Let me, that's actually a pretty good thing, but for the purpose of this video, it's not.
The fact that I would value 10 living human organisms over one living human organism.
Yes.
Yeah, because
Okay.
they're
Just-
single cell organisms.
Just a follow up question.
Do people really listen to these guys? Because that was, I'm 3.5 minutes in. It's already a 12-minute video. Because this is just ridiculous. So they basically said to demonstrate the absurdity of what you're saying, you would favor the single cell organisms over the one newborn. Oh, this retard argument. In fact, I should have made my voice like really high pitched, so it's more accurate. But okay, you said it's ridiculous. How? Demonstrates? Like, they're just treating it as a given that it's just ridiculous. Right? And this is the problem with taking their thought experiments, arguing on the same ground as atheists, because they start making these dumb claims. Like, he basically just said he made a reductio ad absurdum argument. Reductio argument. But, again, the atheist problem is that, I mean, how do you determine what is ridiculous and not ridiculous? In the philosophical sense. I guess that's ridiculous is being used a bit loosely. Right? Logically incoherent versus not logically incoherent. Because that's all that matters in debate, right? Doesn't matter what you think about it, because then that would be appeal to incredulity. So, substance, please.
Follow up question on that. When you
Feel free to
say,
ask a follow-up question.
well,
and I have
just
another
hang on,
one
just
for
hang
you
on.
because I
When
want
you said that it was
Okay, yeah, so Dean is trying to only stay on offense because he cannot play defense. I don't know if he just developed this because people are really dumb on TikTok and stuff, or he just understands that he has no defensive game. So, I don't know which one it is.
absurd. By what standard are you judging it to be absurd?
Yeah, we'd be
Good. It's good question.
judging it to be absurd based upon like my preferences.
Okay, but my
So if you don't
preference,
think
but
that-
my,
Okay, so good. So now Dean plays defense for approximately 10 seconds, and he's already completely destroyed his worldview. He is a subjectivist. That's what that position would entail. So he believes that, well, it's just my preferences. So it's an opinion. So that basically reduces his argument down to, I like chocolate ice cream and you like vanilla ice cream. Substance, please. Like,
my preferences differ
Hayden,
from
Hayden,
yours. So who's
five,
right?
Five, don't interrupt me. I'll describe it.
so see, desperately trying to stay on offense.
To you. You have to be able to let me speak. Are you okay with having a productive?
Sure, but I would.
Oh, it's productive. So it's Dean is like the debate equivalent of a guy in boxing who doesn't headbutt you like this, but you're kind of working in a clinch, and then he tries to switch shoulders and he kind of just knocks his head into you a little bit, but you can play it off like an accident. That's Dean's debate style, because now he's talking about productive debate, right? So he's using rhetoric to basically frame Hayden as someone who's trying to run him over, someone who's not interested in productive discussion. But Dean, he's the messiah of debaters. Basically, that's the rhetorical position he's trying to put himself in, building up ethos. And the problem is that if you break down what he's saying, it's complete opposite because he just used an example that is definitely does nothing to advance the debate and just for a TikTok clip. I would say that's not productive at all. And also, he just made an appeal to reductive argument when he said himself it's all subjective. So basically, everything he's saying is arbitrary. If his epistemic standard is that it's my preference, then by definition, everything says is arbitrary, which means without reason. It's ad hoc. So productive.
Would like the chance to respond because it seems like you just want to not give me a chance to
You have a
respond
chance
after
to
asking
respond
questions.
after I'm
Okay.
done. You don't have a chance to respond midway through this.
Okay.
Is that fair?
Yeah, just one question. It looks like I'm. Yeah, just yeah. That's what I was going to ask.
Feel
So-
free to me. I don't want to say anything until you're.
No,
I
I was.
don't like
I just saw I was muted, and I had not joined someone else's live before, so I wasn't sure how to unmute. But then it popped up on the screen, so I was just.
But you will not have a chance to respond in the middle of this.
Sure, but just a follow up on that. If I say
So
that,
wait, you don't get a follow-up, though, because
no,
remember, I
no,
was
I'm
in
not
the middle
asking
of
a
my
question.
sentence.
I'm
No,
just
sir,
asking.
sir, no,
Oh
no,
my
you
goodness.
don't get a follow-up because I was
Okay,
in the
now
middle of my
And I'm
sentence
muted.
to your last follow-up. In order for us to have a productive
I-
conversation, we both have to be able to have a chance to speak.
So, in a world where I decided to debate Dean, I would destroy him, but I am never going to debate them in this context because when Dean is his own moderator, he does stuff like this. Like, this is dumb. Okay? He's acting like Hayden, just running him over, interrupting over and over and over again. It's not the case. He's just overplaying. It's like a. And you know what's funny? As soon as Dean got put on defense, he started doing this. It's very interesting. I wonder if this is planned or something, but. And I've seen one TikTok live of Dean a little bit about abortion. He kind of does this a lot with people, accuses them of interrupting a lot. And what people don't understand is that in a debate, I guess it depends on the rules of where you're conducting it. So maybe this is a nil point, but I guess it's just to say that in some debates you're allowed to interrupt your opponent if they're straying away from the topic. And in which case, I think Dean could have been fairly interrupted many, many times. So the fact that he's acting like interrupting in the sense that Hayden's doing is like a very bad thing to do. Very poor etiquette is just dishonest. But yeah, if I ever were to debate Dean, there has to be a third-party moderator. Never anything like this. I don't want like the people who walk up to people like Charlie Kirk does the stand thing, and people walk up and do debates with him. Never do that. Never do the TikTok live debate stuff because this is basically just clip farming. Okay, I'm not saying Hayden's clip farming because I think Hayden's actually trying to have an argument. Dean Parker, they're just clip farmers. Okay, even when they're in a sit-down debate, they do the
I
same
noticed
things.
the biggest issue with a lot of people that come up here and debate, a lot of people that debate in general, this is true to the right, as it's true to a lot of people on the left, right? Is trying to remove
I'm
the chance
muted
for
still.
a response, right? I feel as if you're trying to
Still
avoid
muted.
an actual conversation because
Okay.
people don't want to just say.
Okay, so now he's the big moral teacher. He's the holier than thou.
So I'm gonna address what you say one by one.
Muted.
Respond, and then ask me new questions one by one. I can do the same thing to you. That's how you have to.
Still muted.
I hate that I have to do this. Okay.
Just
So the last thing.
Holier than thou. Oh my god, this is insane. This no wonder people like this guy, because everyone's dumb, right? And he pushes himself as holier than thou, fighting for the rights of others, all these different things. He's like a moral hero. That's what he frames himself as.
The thing you asked me is how is it absurd, right? Or what determines absurdity? I told you that I'm indexing the absurdity to my preferences. You then told me, well, what if you have different preferences? Who's right and who's wrong? So in that situation, there's going to be no objective arbiter of whose preferences matter.
Like I said, so it's arbitrary, basically. In other words, it's arbitrary, so his argument has no grounding. Like I said at the start of the video, there's no grounding for anything. So.
So you're right. That would be a dead-end position as it didn't into our conversation, right? So you're right. That would be a dead-end position as it.
He just said it would be a dead-end position. So by Dean's own epistemology, in order to invalidate his argument and render it nil, and granted it could render your argument nil on his worldview too, but in order to cancel out Dean's argument, all you have to do is say, I disagree with you. This is so bad, dude. And no one picks up on this. No one is able to realize that this is the case. Like, you literally just have to say, Dean, I disagree with you. Boom. On his own standard, the argument's pointless. As far as convincing other people and showing, well, I guess convincing other people, if you were to talk to them, could happen. But more so in the case of, okay, well, I'm right and you're wrong. Which, when you're doing a debate in front of other people, is the whole point. So, Dean's own epistemology basically invalidates his whole entire profession.
So here's the next step, okay? And I wanted to take it in this route. Let's see here. So you think that all human organisms deserve the exact same amount of moral value.
Like, if I'm Hayden, like, I am completely crushing this epistemology. Okay? I'm just going after the epistemology, because at this point, the abortion debate does not matter anymore.
All deserving of the similar human life. And I want to see how far you're willing to take this to see if it's truly the human life that you value, or if there's other traits that you value that you're just not making clear. If there was a human zygote that were to remain a human zygote for the rest of its existence and not grow into anything new, or have any potential or capacity for higher level of rational acceptance, would you value it the same as you value anyone else?
And now here we go with the more of the thought experiments. Like, I say, well, you know, every human is two arms. You know, humans are born with two arms, rather. That's more succinct way of putting it. And then Dean says, well, what about the people that have, like, birth defects and they're born with one arm? It's like, the exceptions don't disprove rules. Like, I get, it's interesting to go over certain situations to see further what someone can believe, but the problem is that when you're arguing about a grand point, a rule, using some little exception argument does nothing. Okay? Because in theory, you could have the position that abortion is wrong and then answer this question either way. So, it's partially why I think debates like this are pointless, because you end up just arguing about a bunch of stupid stuff. But also, I mean, this is just not intelligent.
Yes.
Conducting of a debate, and I have another 20 minutes of this, bro. Oh my god, dude.
Now, please tell me why you should value a unicellular organism that will remain a unicellular organism insofar as determining that it's murder as long as it's a part of our species. Meanwhile,
Human nature. It's a human nature. Right. So, on our system, and I assume his system as well, I mean, he hasn't used the word human nature, but I'm sure if I were to talk to him, were to, break it down together, human nature would be, like, 'cause human nature is the word you use, like, for God's at nature, philosophical context about what God can do and what God can't do, talk about nature, and same thing goes for humans. Free will is fine with human nature as well. So, human nature is not a physical attribute. It's a non-physical abstract attribute. So it doesn't matter if it's a single cell, if it's a fully grown human. As long as it's a human nature, it has identical value. And then they laugh about it and don't really provide an argument. But hopefully I don't have to keep pausing, because I have to explain all these things, because if you just watch and you don't know these things, this all just goes over.
You don't think you're doing anything wrong when you brush your teeth until 400 trillion life forms that are of a similar size, standard, and growth
Not human natures.
as that unicellular.
Sure. So when I brush my teeth, I'm not killing any living human organisms. And if you reject the standard that all living human organisms are equally valuable and equally have a right not to be murdered, then I would argue you end up with some repugnant consequences. Now, the problem with your line of questioning here is that you still haven't established an absolute standard of rationality by which you're going to judge my answers or yours outside of your personal preference. And if your personal preference is the only standard you're judging my answers by, then all I have to do is judge your answers by my personal preference, and there is no ultimate arbiter, is there?
So Hayden, as I already described, when we want to use our preferences to determine what's absurd and what's not absurd, you're right, and that's why I classify that as a dead end. However, the absolute standard for rationale would just be the three consequential classical laws of logic, and we typically judge the internal.
Wait, so there is an arbiter. So there is an arbiter, but he said there wasn't. So yeah, he doesn't even understand his own epistemology. But I know what he's about to say, but let's just let him finish, and then I'll explain to you why what he's saying is dumb.
Based upon an internal contradiction, depending on the reason which you want to be true. However, to go ahead and finish off what I was originally saying to you, you said that
Essentially,
you
what he's saying
value-
is that it's going to end up violating your own intuitions by the use of like some sort of.
Okay,
Yeah,
just
Okay, the problem with that is, okay, so he's talking about internal critique, basically. It's turning into internal critique. The thing is, in order for a person, Dean, Parker, whoever, to make an internal critique, they presuppose logic, okay? And apparently, based on what you just said, or the classical laws of logic, that is just assumed. Oh, the laws of logic are just true. No justification for it. I really hope Hayden asks him why the laws of logic are true. Because you kind of get him with the problem. I assume they kind of believe in the I think, therefore I am, Descartesian slash Aristotelian empiricist epistemology, where your sense experience is the starting point. The problem is that when you ask someone like this, they would always say begging the question, circular argument is wrong. But if you ask them, okay, why are the laws of logic true? They'll start using logic to prove logic, which would be a fallacy on their own view. Now, meanwhile, me, a lot of Christians are natural theologians, but me as a presupper would say, no matter what your worldview is, there's going to be some level of circularity at the beginning. So the question is whether who can justify coherently more things than the other, who can provide a more coherent account for the world we live in, the things we have, etc. And Dean and Parker can't do that at all.
And
just
the
hang on.
consistency
One
test
question
would be
there.
guided-
If I
No,
allow you to
no,
follow.
because I was
Oh
in the
my
middle of
goodness,
speaking
I'm muted
still.
again.
So Dean was just talking for like 2 or 3 minutes. Hayden goes in to point out how what he's saying is dumb, and then he mutes him. So is this all he does?
We agreed that in order for us to have a fair conversation, we both have to be able to finish speaking. I allowed you to do that. And at
I was
first you
just
were
running
I'm out of water.
Yeah, that was my bad for cutting off.
Oh, no, you're good, partner. I think you-
Still muted.
So anyways, to go back to what I was saying. So you told me that you value a unicellular organism that had no...
Okay, so he completely diverts off the dumb thing he just said. Okay, I see what they do. Okay, the second it becomes a question about their own epistemology, explaining their own worldview, which is extremely important when you're in a debate, they just switch. Boom, switch. This is ridiculous.
growth potential and would remain a unicellular organism for the rest of its existence as long as it's a part of our species. So tell me why similar genome, in the sense of the structure of our DNA, are, I guess, similar enough for biologists to classify as a part of your same species, is morally valuable.
Okay, so his epistemic standard for this argument is a biologist. So he's answering a philosophical question with a scientific argument, basically. Empiricist, whatever word you want to use. Doesn't work, okay? Because that's an appeal to authority, one. And two, just because you prove an organism is similar to the human organism doesn't mean that it has equal value. And I would argue that Hayden could have done a much better job of just saying human nature, because that would completely sidestep this question. That would just make this question completely redundant. Although he did kind of say human nature, he didn't exactly say to use the word organism. So it kind of brings the opening for someone to say, well, human organism similar to another organism, blah, blah, blah. But similar or not similar doesn't matter. One's a human nature, one's not. So
I find that to be insane, and I'd ask you for your reasons why.
So just to clarify the question again. So the reasoning why I would value a living human organism.
okay, so what Dean has done now is just completely divert off. I think Hayden was about to completely destroy his epistemology. He switched holier than thou, muted him, and then diverted the line of questioning. Something completely different, and now Hayden's answering his other questions. So, I mean, this is... Dean, if there was a third-party moderator in this debate, would be getting destroyed. Because this is not...
organism at the
fair
zygote stage,
debate.
so the one-celled stage, versus other forms of
I'll make
one-cellular
clear,
life.
that is the only stage it will exist in ever.
Yes, and you're asking me to compare that to
And
the...
he's making like these dumb thought experiments. That's the only stage we'll live in ever. like, why are we talking about exceptions that are exceedingly rare? Why don't we just talk about the highbrow general situations? Okay, and then we can talk about the exceptions later.
The
This makes
value of
sense.
something that is also one cell but doesn't have unique human DNA, so something like a horse at the zygote stage or something like that.
Actually, no. The question that I'm asking you is why is DNA that is sufficiently similar to yourself to be categorized as a Homo sapiens sapien grant moral value?
Because it's made in the image of God.
There we go.
Okay, and
So
then
all
I mean, no, I would have said it's human nature. And then if you ask why do human natures have value, then you turn into a presuppositional argument where you flesh things out. I think it's true. Not just like I don't want to just say like, well, he shouldn't have said God because that's bad for his debate. But I think even from a philosophical perspective, that's a bit of a like you're saying one thing before you say another. But generally speaking, that's still way better than what they're saying.
do I have a chance to examine your position yet?
almost. There's one more thing that I bet Parker would want to run on as it relates to Christianity and your pro-choice position.
You can run your thing on him. There's just one point I would want to bring up.
Okay,
I mean, We'll
fantastic.
leave it up to you. I've been asking things of you. You get to choose it.
Yeah, I've been waiting a while. Just a quick clarification. When I was trying to ask a question, it actually wasn't going to be about your position. It was just going to be about the course of the conversation going forward. So I wasn't actually interrupting to try to sort of ask a question that would help my view. I was just trying to clarify sort of the terms of the future of the conversation. So I did just want to clarify that. But now that I do have a chance to examine your view, what would you consider makes a human being, actually any being, value? What would you consider gives a being a right not to be murdered by another human being?
So hold a conjuncts to distribute moral value sufficient to grant the right to life.
Well, I can't hear him. Hold on. I need to turn this thing up.
So hold a conjuncts to distribute moral value sufficient to grant the right to life. The same conjunct as Parker, and that would be a conjunct between past, present, and future subjective experiences. Would you like me to explain what a conjunct is? No, please feel free to ask.
Okay, so basically, none of that matters. So, because there's a prior question to be asked to that. So if I'm Hayden, I'm asking, okay, well, where is this grounded? And then the argument goes back to where Dean literally is. It's like a little kid in a pool without floaties.
Yeah, and so one question I have that under that conjunct, can you give me an example then of beings that would fit that?
Okay, no. The problem with what Hayden's doing is that he's accepting arguments on poor grounds. So I'll use a football example. Let's say someone said, okay, it's very obvious that Joe Flacco is the second best quarterback of all time. So what I'm going to say is that is Tom Brady or Aaron Rodgers number one player of all time? Would you answer that question, or would you like, whoa, Joe Flacco was not number two? You would say Joe Flacco's not number two because they said something really dumb before they asked their question. And that's what they're doing, but they're not explicitly saying the dumb part. It's implicit. It's entailed in what they're saying. It's an assumption they're making. So Hayden's basically arguing about Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers when the guy just said Joe Flacco's number two. He should be stepping back and then asking based on assumptions, not moving forward with it, because he's accepting the assumption, which is wrong. Which is why, atheists, you could beat them in like 5 seconds. You just ask them about epistemology or whatever, and then they immediately move to something arbitrary 99.9% of the time. Well, it's always arbitrary, but whether it's explicitly arbitrary depends a little bit, but oh my God, I'm 35 minutes into this, dude, and there's like still 17 minutes left. God.
Like a few to say about 20 to 24 weeks in accordance with the consensus on when they deploy any level of sentience emergence. Would be an example of an individual or entity that fit that conjunct, or just
Who cares?
Okay, so
bro? Why does that matter? Why does it matter? And I want you guys to understand that I'm making an epistemology versus ontology distinction. What that means is, like, let's say one guy says murder is wrong and I say murder is wrong. And then I ask them, well, why is murder wrong? Then go like, well, you don't think murder is wrong? Like, no. We agree on the ontology, murder is wrong, but we disagree on the epistemology, which is, why is murder wrong? I believe murder is wrong because of objective morality, and you get into God and whatnot. And they believe murder's wrong because, I don't know, their aunt baked the pie and they say that. Clearly that's dumb. But their ontology, murder's wrong, is agreed on, but the epistemology, justification, is not agreed on. So, yeah, we can talk about the fetus and the science stuff and whatever. It doesn't matter. That's all logically posterior to grounding everything you're saying as into why it matters. So I would be asking you epistemic questions.
Yeah, just a clarification then on that. Let me make sure I got your position here right. So your position would be that you value any life form that has a conjunction between past or present and future subjective experiences.
So typically this conjunction would be applied to grant the right to life in special sense to humans, but that gets into a lot of nonsense. So like for all intents and purposes, that'd be the position. It would entail ethical humanism. We might take it down that road, and that's the easiest position for all intents and purposes. But the water could get muddy. Like for instance, if we could hold like another clarification, you also have to be human for some other reasons.
Yeah, just another concept.
Okay, so just a question on that then. If you had to choose between saving 10 adult pigs or one newborn human being, which would you choose?
It'd be the
Newborn human being, absolutely.
For the reason that we already listed.
What's that reason? Maybe I missed it.
Yeah,
In the conjunct of human. They need a particular
Okay.
threshold of
Doesn't-
rationality, so we also have the same.
Just 1 second there. Don't all of the adult pigs also have a conjunct between past or present and future subjective experiences?
They don't need the second conjunct of also being human.
Oh, okay, I see. Okay, I guess another line of reason that then might help me understand your position.
Yeah, so basically they're saying, well, if you're human and you can have sense experience in the past and present, then you are valuable. Okay, well, why does having the ability to have past and present experience denote value? Why? That's the first question you should be asking. Second question, well, you can ask these in any order, actually. It's like, okay, well, why does being a human matter? Now, obviously, I think being a human matters, but I'm asking them why they think that. Because I think the reasoning is probably something arbitrary, which they basically admitted to at the start of this debate, so this is kind of a waste of time.
Position a little bit better. If I offered you guys, and I'm not going to give you guys this money, but just take it as hypotheticals for the sake of me sort of examining your position here. If I offered you $1 million plus a plastic water bottle that is empty, what would you offer to pay me for that?
Okay, so now this is just what is the point of this, man?
Wait, say that one more time?
Yeah, if I offered you $1 million in addition to a plastic water bottle that is completely empty, how much would you offer to pay me for that? Okay, so like roughly $1 million.
Yeah, I'm
Okay, so like
confused with the relevance. of
not
this.
well, we'll get there. So like $999,999, you can make $1 profit.
Yeah, I mean, well, obviously that's in like a theoretical sense. Like we wouldn't actually like be willing to do that in real terms because there's plenty of opportunity costs. You have to take into account liability, other types of.
Okay.
Like, why would you ever bring up that thought experiment? It's just
But roughly,
That'd be all
would $999,000 roughly be about what you pay, right?
I'd offer to pay you
No,
anything
no,
that would
like-
inevitably. How about this? We just set this principle. I'd offer to pay you anything that inevitably allowed me to profit.
Okay, let me maybe rephrase then.
Yeah, that's
What is-
theoretical, but like in reality, that wouldn't.
Okay, let me rephrase that in a way that might be more helpful. What is the value of $1 million plus an empty plastic water bottle, roughly?
$1 million in like 3 cents.
Okay, thank you. What is the value of a plastic water bottle and a crushed pop can? Okay, and what is the value of $1 million plus a crushed pop can?
you're gonna like circle this to like humans, because I don't know how you could avoid making a false analogy, but I don't know. Let me see. I still think this is a complete waste of time to go down this line, but so
Okay.
let me cook.
Gotcha. So the reason that I brought that up is because it seems to me that when you say a human who has a conjunction between past or present and future subjective experiences has value enough to not be murdered, but every single other non-human animal that has that same conjunction, we can go ahead and kill for food, or we can go ahead and kill to help the environment or something like that, then it seems to me that the part that's providing all of the value in the union between the being and the conjunction of past or present and future subjective experiences is the human part, isn't it?
No, it'd be both of them together.
Well, I think Hayden made a good point there. I think the part about the water bottles and stuff is completely waste of time. He could have just said this straight up. Um, so he just pointed out that, well, animals have past and present experience, have that concept, as I said, and apparently that doesn't do anything for them because they're not human. So yeah, I mean, he's right, and it's kind of dumb, right? The differentiating factor is that they're human. So I mean, yeah, the part about past and present experience and future experience is kind of pointless.
And
That's what a construct is.
No, but my question is, when we talk about other non-human animals
Because if
that
it's
also
just
have the
human, I'll give you an
conjunction,
example. Can I give you an example? If
Sure,
there was a
go for it.
specific zygote, I wouldn't care about killing a zygote. You can kill a trillion zygotes, and I wouldn't give a shit. If I slap a zygote under your view, I should go to prison, right?
And then, like, additionally, one other thing is, like, I'm pretty agnostic on veganism. So, like, maybe it is wrong to kill babies.
Yeah, but like we would still say that like we would rather save one newborn baby over 10, right? Ethical. That's not an entailment
but
of ethical
just-
veganism. All right, and we can have our separate.
Okay, I see what they're saying with past present experience with the zygote and human. I guess it does have to be two. So I guess within the context of the debate, that is a valid point. Valid as far as their own presuppositions, which I already said are retarded. So, oh my god. Okay, we're going through this fast now, though.
And then, like,
but
another-
having a difference in value between humans and non-humans isn't like an entailment of veganism.
And then another perspective on why, like, I might save like a newborn baby of like a billion, maybe a billion pigs, who knows? Is that I'd care sufficiently much more about the second condition of the conjunct, that being their future capabilities, but it's going to be entirely predicated on the past or present.
well, just one question there. If it's about, if it's,
It's all arbitrary, dude.
the future abilities on past or present abilities, present that in a fetus, in a fetus of 24 weeks are going to be considerably more valuable than a pig. However, you still hold the axiom of truth that being future considerations predicating on the present supply of
so let's try this then. So same scenario I mentioned earlier where you can either save those 10 pigs or the one newborn human, but you know that one newborn human has some sort of birth defect where they're actually guaranteed to die at about 2 years old. So you can't really appeal to them having,
like, bro, like, why do we talk? Like, why do people make all these thought experiments up there? It's such a waste of time. Like, they do nothing to advance anything. Like, this is a question of epistemology, moral epistemology, and then you start talking about abortion and stuff. But the atheists can't even last for over 5 seconds in a moral epistemic debate. So why are we talking about $1 million in a plastic bottle? Why are we talking about pushing 2 buttons, killing 10 versus 1? Why are we talking about this, what he just said? Like, it's just such a waste of time.
a future conscious experience that exceeds that of a pig, since consciousness is more of a spectrum than a dividing line. It's something that increases over time, increases with development. Which would you choose then, knowing that that newborn human being isn't going to develop past age 2? It'll die at age 2.
I don't see why this would be an entailment. We would still say the human.
Mhm.
I'd still rather say the human.
And doesn't
Like,
doesn't that expose though that what's providing
No.
all the value is the humanity and not the conjunction?
No. What's providing the value is those traits together. That's how a conjunction works.
No, but what I'm pointing out though is when I take
Both of
those same
traits in conjunction, because I just explained to you, I wouldn't care if you killed an infinite level of human zygotes, right? They have that human, right, but they don't have the sentience. So you understand that you could say from both perspectives, right, that one's carrying the weight of the other one. Well, they're both carrying it together. That's how a conjunction works.
but the sentience is pretty clearly not what's mattering here, is it?
What I just explained specifically, it's sentient.
No, I think Parker's right about this. I think I was wrong earlier when I said the humanity's the only thing that brings the value. I think what they're saying makes sense. Now that you brought up an example, I understand what he's trying to say. But the problem is that it's still arbitrary. So instead of butting your head against the wall like Hayden is, I think you should be pointing out that it's arbitrary. Maybe, just maybe. It's another 10 minutes left. I don't know what possibly the next 10 minutes can entail.
Plus the fact that they're human, right?
And the human's doing all the work there.
No, it's not. I just explained in the context of a human zygote. I don't care if you were to kill an infinite set of human zygotes.
I think I would like to raise a point to demonstrate like how much sentience matters. And I think I can relay this point to you in a way that you might agree. So let's just assume that the entirety of the species of humanity remains the same. However, right, humans evolved in such a way to not forget these things. We were meat bags only. In this alternative world, who would you rather save?
And also, another thing, and just talking about sentience, this is kind of like the argument about consciousness. I'm not sure if Dean or Parker can even establish that sentience is a valid thing. Now, again, it's another ontology epistemology thing, right? Obviously, we agree that they're sentience, but as far as how they justify sentience, I don't think they can. I mean, well, I know they can't, but to elaborate, they can be susceptible to like stuff like the simulation theory. They can be susceptible to things like, well, what if you're hallucinating right now? And I suppose hallucination. Well, I guess the point about sentience is more so talking about other people's sentience. For all they know, they could be the only sentient beings in the world. So them talking about the sentience of others could be completely redundant. Now, obviously, I don't think that they're only sentient people in the world, but I don't see how in their worldview of just subjectivism they could ever establish how there is other sentience logically without committing fallacy. That's another thing to know. I mean, there's so many things to know. And at this point, I'm just getting tired of these dumb thought experiments.
Meat bag nonsense of humans, or one cow?
So just one question here. If I assume that
Let
world,
me make sure
Relay this.
I understand.
And zygote.
I
I don't
actually-
care if you were to kill an infinite set of human zygotes.
I think I would like to raise a point to demonstrate like how much sentience matters, and I think I can relay this point to you in a way that you might be able to agree. So let's just assume that the entirety of the species of humanity remains the same. However, right, humans evolved in such a way to not forget these things. We were meat bags only.
What is the point? Like, such a dumb. And again, I don't know if you could, like, I don't think we're meat bags on the floor, but I was Dean. How are we not meat bags on the floor? Or meat bags walking? That's a huge distinction. How do you even establish any value from a human to an animal on the world? So again, these are the questions Hayden should be asking, but he's not. And I think he was kind of going down a line where it kind of, was going in the right direction, but now this is just off the rails. And I think Hayden is borderline losing the debate. It's close if you were to score the debate, but Hayden and Dean and Parker should be able to last for over 5 seconds. It's just not a good debate strategy being deployed.
In this alternative world, who would you rather save? 10 of the meat bag nonsense of humans, or one cow?
so just one question here. If I assume that worldview, then Christianity would necessarily not be true. Do you recognize that, right? Because
Christianity is already
you're assuming macroevolution, which would contradict the biblical account of Genesis.
Okay, so in other words,
wait,
So-
you think evolution contradicts Genesis?
Believing that the Earth is millions of years old and that it wasn't created in 6 days is an obvious
old is the Earth?
contradiction. So you'll get different numbers depending on how you go through the chronological order of events in the Bible, but I would say less than 25,000 years is what you probably have to answer if you believe in a literal Genesis.
Wait, so
It's
you just
45.
you deny science completely and totally just because your biblical view says so? That's like actually insane.
Hey, Park.
Okay, so I'm not going to get into 6-day literalism versus the other view. I don't care about that right now. I just want this video to be over with, to be honest, but I think there's a point bringing it up. Park says, you're literally denying science. Okay, why is that wrong in review? Why is denying science? What gives science grounding? How do you answer the problem of induction? How do you know that the future will be like the past in the way that allows scientific repetition?
Hang
25,000
on.
years?
Is science based on the uniformity of nature?
Oh, okay.
You mean by-
Please, yes, please bring up the problem of induction. Please, thank you.
By uniformity of nature.
That nature will act in the future as it has in the past.
No, what we're saying is it's likely to, right? So
Oh,
we're not
it's-
saying
well,
it's
hang
certain.
on.
What we're saying is it's very likely.
Okay, so he turns it from a deductive to inductive. But I think he has the same problem as if you made a deductive argument. As in, why is it likely? Because you still can't really say because in the past, because that's still begging the question. Although you could say the fallacy is a little bit diminished because it's inductive, but that's really the only point they have in order to try and answer the problem of induction. Um, yeah, I don't think what he says works in order to sidestep the problem.
Based
When
on
you
the
say-
evidence within the context of
Mhm.
science, we're saying it's very likely.
And when you say it's likely to, what are you basing that on?
We're basing it on
Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, it's still begging the question because he's using induction to prove induction. So yeah, it's still begging the question. And saying likely doesn't fix anything for the problem. And that's really matters because that's the whole reason why science is possible in the worldview. The uniformity of nature. So if he doesn't ground that, then his science is completely useless from an epistemic view. Obviously, you would agree that, scientific experience about what temperature water boils at are valid, but epistemically, he has no way of justifying it. That being said, I think that's the first really good point Hayden has made. Hopefully, if he continues down this line, he's gonna expose a major contradiction in your view.
on priors.
On priors. So if I ask you how, what are you basing that on?
We're basing it on priors.
On priors. So if I ask you how you know
Priors, yeah, that's begging the question.
gravity will act tomorrow.
Priors
It's
and
on models.
probability.
It's on models.
If I ask you, okay, so again, just give me a chance to ask a question. If I ask you, how do you know gravity will act tomorrow as it has in the past? What would your answer be?
Again, probability.
But that
Probability based on.
begs the
As it
question.
how's that beg? What begs what question?
Because I didn't
Are you
ask.
saying that are you saying we require certainty in order to be able to establish?
No. Oh my God. Okay, Hayden, please don't go railroaded, bro. Please, you can really turn things around. Please do not. Please don't let him railroad because Parker's now doing this stupid thing where he's talking about something that no one said. Like, no one said anything about it. You're begging the question because you're using induction to prove induction. Okay? That's the problem.
True claims.
Again, I'm just going to repeat the question, and I'll point out how it's begging
Can
the
you
question
answer
fallacy.
the question?
I'm trying to. When I say, how do you know gravity will act tomorrow as it has in the past? And then you say, well, it's likely to based on what's happened in the past. I'm not asking about what's happened in the past. I'm asking about what's going to happen in the future, aren't I?
I would have explained there how he's begging the question because the way you explain he's begging the question is saying, well, if you think that gravity will act tomorrow as it did before, and you base it on priors, you're using what is in question to prove what is in question, which is begging the question. That's literally the definition of begging the question. And I don't know if Parker is just, well, he is dumb, but does he really not understand that problem? Because clearly he knows a little about the uniformity of nature, like the line of argument. If he knows the line of argument at least 1%, he would understand what the Christian here is trying to say. So is he being intellectually dishonest? Is he just that ignorant? I'm not sure.
It's probability.
And what are you basing that probability
That's
on?
what probability
What are
is.
you basing the probability on?
Based upon what's occurred.
That's begging the question, exactly. The probability you're inducting based on the past. When the question is about induction in the first place, which is the uniformity of nature. Nature will be uniform because nature has been uniform. That's his argument. That's begging the question, by definition.
So you're
Right?
basing
the
it on
fact that it's
past.
occurred a repetitive level of time.
Am I asking about the
indicates a
past or the
greater
future?
Hayden, can I explain to you how this can justify a greater level of probability?
Go
If
for
you
it.
can identify that something happens over and over and over again on a repetitive basis, does that increase the probability that that is the cause of the action?
Yes, but your problem is that I'm asking you about that specific thing. I'm asking you why does something happening over and over and over again therefore mean that will happen in the future? And you just say, well, it just has. That's begging the question. And to grand scheme this into the uniformity of nature question, he's basically just saying, well, nature's been uniform over and over and over again, therefore nature will be uniform. Which is begging the question because you're using the uniformity of nature to prove the uniformity of nature.
Do you just also
Can I answer?
reject
Can I answer what
deduction
Parker
based-
just? Can I answer what
Hold on.
Parker
So you
just?
see, like now Hayden's on a line where they have very weak arguments, and see how they start interrupting more. Notice that? I really think, I think they're either like just really they've really done this so much that this is like an instinct to them, or they actually plan this stuff.
Just ask?
Let him answer if I can.
Okay, yeah. So if I was to go buy 1,000 red houses, and you asked me what color is the next house going to be, and I say that it's red, because that's what the houses have been in the
Yeah,
past.
that would be
Do I
most
know?
likely, yeah.
Do I know? Really?
What do
Really?
you mean?
No,
It's
no,
not
no,
certain,
no,
but it's
Parker!
most likely.
Really?
No.
Yeah. So Parker kind of just committed a fallacy there. Kind of. Yeah. What Parker just said is technically a fallacy, but also can you hone in on the begging of the question part, because that completely destroys everything he said.
Oh, no.
Or could it be any color?
Wait, no, it could be any color, but what is most likely?
No, he's
Well, hang on. How do you know that it's most likely to be red?
Again, because of the fact that there are priors that indicate the likelihood of it being this.
And so
Hayden,
if I
Right,
flip a
there's
coin,
better
specific
example.
probability of it being
there's
the
a better
case.
example you could use. Hayden.
yeah, if I
Flipping a
roll
coin.
a dice, for example, that's 10
Yeah, all
sided,
you're-
and it lands
all
on
you're-
10.
All you're bringing up is the problem induction. I'm not disputing that there is a problem, but that's not a problem in terms of the likelihood or whether or not we can say true things are the case, right? It is just
It is a problem because it completely destroys your epistemology. The truth is based on epistemology. So, if the problem of induction destroys your epistemology, which it does, then you have no truth. So, what are you talking
just
about?
simply describing that we're not certain. Okay,
Right.
us not being certain is
Do
not
you
a
live like
critique
that?
of the worldview.
Do you live like
Yes,
that?
it is.
I live based on probability, right?
Well, okay, the problem of induction is a critique on your worldview, but you saying that it's not certain doesn't solve that critique. That's what I mean by that.
What are you talking about?
On this
You don't have a
particular
basis for.
Point, on this particular point, one second. On this particular point, Hayden is right, mathematically speaking. However, he's obfuscating between two separate positions. So the positions that he's obfuscating between is like a prediction of like gravity existing tomorrow because it existed prior, and like the prediction of what is going to be true of the next coin flip because of the coin flips prior. So, like for instance, if you flip a coin like 100 times, and the first
This
50
does nothing to solve the problem of induction.
times you flip it lands heads, right? That doesn't increase.
This just simply is talking about how Parker is dumb and fell for a trick question when that trick question completely wasted time. Trick question in quotes, I guess, because I mean they've all been doing it. So I mean, I guess it's just normal, right? The question that Hayden asked, which he shouldn't have asked in the first place, he should have gone down the line of explaining explicitly how it is begging the question. Just straight up say it in one line. Which you never did.
Heads the next, right? And he's trying to use this point to obfuscate between this other point.
That's because we have other knowledge about other priors or other things that could be the case. If we didn't have that
Because-
knowledge, we wouldn't be able to make that assertion.
Okay.
No. If you don't have knowledge about something, you're going to be able to make a different probabilistic assertion, right? Because evidence points towards a particular thing. That's reasonable for someone to conclude if it is the case that they have a certain set of information.
Hey, just one question. I know we're kind of getting over towards religion. I do want to be respectful of the prompt you have up. If you guys do want to take it back to the Trump will be terrible for
Oh, can I
America,
actually, before we do it, I want to run one thing on you.
go for it.
Okay. Do you think you should do as God does?
This was the first 21 minutes of a debate that ended up lasting about an hour and a half. The rest of the debate mainly focused on also has a human organism with a conjunct of past.
Okay, don't care.
That's
Okay, the debate's over. Thank God, because that was just a dumpster fire. But so he started talking about God. It's actually kind of interesting. Talking about should you do as God does? Very equivocal question, but not even gonna. Damn, it's my hand on my desk. Not gonna worry about that. If you guys want me to react to that, maybe we'll do it another time. Just send me videos in my Discord. That being said, I think I've talked enough in this video about what I think about this debate. Very low quality. Okay, if you want to get smarter, you want to learn things, do not watch TikTok debates. Do not watch those videos where it's someone on the stand and people walk up and they have a conversation. Do not watch those videos. Those videos make you dumb. Okay? If you want to get smarter, watch/read some hard-hitting stuff. Whether it be actual good debates or philosophers, whether you agree with them or not, so you can start learning what the foundations of everything that everyone is saying actually is, not just these TikToks clip farming segments. Oh, yeah.